Hi, and welcome to Localized Podcast, the podcast about linguistic discrimination.
I'm Megan Figueroa.
And I'm Carrie Gillen.
I hear that one of the dictionaries already has a word of the year.
Yes, I think it's actually the second one, but I don't remember what the other dictionary was. It was probably an Australian dictionary. So, At least with the Merriam-Webster.
Yes. The old MW.
Good old MW!
Yeah.
The word of the year is vaccine.
Okay. Yes. I was ready to be angry. I don't know how I was going to be angry at it, or whatever the word was, but that makes sense.
It makes total sense.
It feels good.
Like, it feels good. It feels right. It feels, yes, it's not a new word, but again, it doesn't have to be. It just has to be newly relevant, which it definitely was this year.
Yes. Yes. Because unless you were in the trials, most people got it in 2021, right? Right.
So some healthcare workers and some very old people, at least in Canada, got it in December. But the vast majority of Canadians and Americans, got it last year. Or this year.
Right.
Yeah, this year, sorry.
Wow. Yeah, I got mine in January. So before a lot of people. Very lucky.
Yes. And you're boosted now.
I am boosted.
So you want to see the reasoning that they gave?
Yeah.
Why? Okay, so they saw a 601% increase in lookups this past year over last.
Yeah.
So that's six times more. Then had continual spikes of attention throughout the year. And also, it was about much more than medicine in 2021, which is absolutely true.
Oh, I just got chills at that. I mean, I think ever since, what's her name?
Oh, I thought you were going to say Wakefield.
No, what's Wakefield?
Doctor?
Oh, what is that? Who?
Okay, so Dr. Wakefield, although I don't know if I should call him a doctor anymore. I think his license has been revoked. But he was a doctor in the UK who did that big study in the early 2000s or late 90s.
Okay.
And Jenna McCarthy and et al. Took that study and, kind of spread the anti-vax.
Okay, so I know about this study. I didn't know Wakefield. Okay, so Wakefield started it if Jenny McCarthy took it and ran with it. Yeah,
he's patient zero for this particular brand of anti-vax bullshit.
Yeah. Huh. Yeah.
Yeah, so, and the reason why he did the study, so basically his study, for people who don't know, probably most people do, but it supposedly showed a correlation between getting vaccinated and developing autism.
Mm-hmm.
And setting that aside,
right,
which is already, there's so many problems in that.
Right.
But setting that aside, the reason why he did this study is because he had his own vaccine that he wanted to promote.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So.
As if it was the one that wouldn't, quote unquote, cause autism.
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
He also just lied with the data. There's all sorts of problems with the data. But he was, I think he's had his license taken away as a result of the fraud of that study. Wow.
I think it's true, though, what Merriam-Webster says, that it is of particular import this year.
Yes, because it's a new one, because it affects everybody, right? So the HPV vaccine, which came out a few years ago, there were a lot of, anti-vax. There's a lot of anti-vax bullshit floating around with that one.
Right.
But because it was only affecting, at the time, girls.
Right. Yep.
It just didn't quite reach the fever pitch that this one has reached.
Right. But now grown-ass white men have to, get this vaccine. And it's like, no. If I don't want to, I don't want to.
Right. Which technically you don't. It's still not mandated. I mean, it does
some
give
places.
Certain jobs.
Right, yeah. Like the city of Tucson, for example.
Right, but not, you don't have, just existing.
Right.
You can just exist and not be vaccinated. Anyway, it's, it's terrifying.
And all of this conversation we're having right now is because, or really, I guess, underscores how the word vaccine is a great choice for word of the year.
Yes, it's really good. I kudos.
I know, I've never been content about a word of the year. I'm just like, right on. I was going to ask you what you would choose, but now I'm like, would you choose vaccine? Because I feel like I would.
Yeah, I feel like I would too.
Right.
I don't know what's going to happen. American Dialectal Society, I don't know what they're going to choose. I'm assuming this will be on the list, and then I'm going to guess that they're not going to choose it because a different dictionary did. That's usually what happens. That's usually what happens in the room. Oh, so I found out the other one. So the Macquarie Dictionary, which I'm pretty sure is an Australian dictionary. Yes. Their word of the year is, you're going to not know this word, I bet, because I didn't. Stroll out.
Nope. Let me guess. Is it about babies that are stepping out of line?
Nope. It's about vaccine. Still about vaccinations.
How it rolls out?
Right. So it's the blend of stroll and roll out. So in Australia, there was a very slow rollout at first of the vaccines.
Oh.
And they were upset because Australia hadn't bought enough at first, right? And, like, every country had a different strategy and did different things. And at the time, Australia had very few cases, and so they weren't as worried about getting vaccinated. Mm-hmm. They were like, oh, we can postpone, and then Delta hit, and then they needed them.
Yeah.
So, stroll out.
That's funny.
I like it.
It probably means more to Australians.
Way more. It doesn't mean.
Or I know it does. Not probably. Yes.
Because it really felt kind of like a stroll out in Canada too. Like, we felt like we were so far behind the United States, but then when you compared us to like the world as a whole, we were still kind of
right,
on the early side. But it still felt like very slow at first. I was just like, when are we going to get the vaccines? Like, I was vaccinated. I think my first one was in April. My second one was in July. So it felt kind of late.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I'm looking forward to find out what the word of the year is.
Yeah, or like euphemism of the year, or some of these other ones.
Ooh.
Right? Ooh. Because there's got, like, they're not coming to mind now, but I'm sure there are some.
I can't think of any right now either, but I'm not that good at coming up with them.
Right. But there's got to be something related to the pandemic. I mean,
oh, for sure. There's going to be so many. Like, last year had a lot of words related to the pandemic. I think this year will be similar. There will be a similar number because, yeah, it's just, in some ways, it's we're almost worse than it was last year. Like, the cases are not quite as bad in most places, but Omicron is like,
right,
it's kind of scary. And so first they were saying, well, all the cases are mild in South Africa or in Southern Africa with Omicron. Why are you guys worried? And I'm like, okay, I don't know. I'm going to hold off on being scared about this because maybe it is mild. That's fine.
Yeah.
No, toddlers are getting it. And they're being hospitalized. So I'm like,
Does Omicron mean anything? Is it a mashup of something?
It's not a mashup. It's a Greek letter. And yes, it does have a meaning. Your mind is going to be blown. Omicron, Omega. Little O, big O. That was what I read it on Twitter like a week or so ago, like a couple days after it was named, maybe
right.
Maybe even the second day after. And someone tweeted that, and I was like, "Are you kidding me? How did I never know that Omega was big O?"
Yeah, Mega. That's so funny.
I love it so much. But also, why do you have two O's in your alphabet, Greek?
I know. Yeah. Big O and little O. What is happening there? Anyway,
yeah,
I don't know.
I don't know Greek.
Yeah, me neither.
Pretend that I know Greek.
Right. No, I need you to make up an answer right now so I walk away from this feeling good. Wow.
Yeah. Oh, Delta. I bet you Delta will be like a word of the year candidate.
Yes. Yeah.
And maybe Omicron as well.
Yeah, Omicron might be some, like, I think there's a category for, like, actual new.
Yeah, and also, like, going to be important later, because
yes.
So
yeah.
Most likely to succeed, maybe?
Yes, most likely to succeed. I wonder if, like, anti-vaxxer is going to be something that's newly relevant.
I mean, it does seem to be newly relevant. I mean, it's always been there, but now it seems more... It also seems to have a different flavor now. So remember when people thought that anti-vaxxers were on the left?
because of like wellness and like I want my body to be natural kind of thing.
Right.
Yeah.
And there always has been that thing, but it was also on the right. And I would always tell people it's actually slightly to the right. Like there are more people on the right who are anti-vax than on the left.
Right.
And at least in the States. And now I feel like I'm being really proven right. Like, sure, there are still some people on the left who aren't getting this vaccine, but they're being very quiet.
Very quiet. Because it's like they're ashamed, right? But the ones on the right are not ashamed. Like, it's like really, truly embodying the anti of it all.
Right. They're very loud about it. But also, I think, like, it just fits in with their political views better. Mm-hmm. Right? Like,
individualism, I don't need to care about my community and do this thing that actually helps everyone and not just myself. Kind of thing.
And the government's trying to control me, and the government's evil. And
what are they inserting into my body, really? Yeah.
And although they're also now anti-big pharma, which used to be the people on the left were the anti-big pharma. So it used to be on the left, anti-big pharma. That's the reason why you don't want to get vaccinated.
Right.
Big pharma, they're huge corporations and they don't have your best interest in mind, which is kind of true. But like vaccinations are like a net good.
Right. Yes.
And then on the right, the people on the right, they were anti-government, so they were anti, the government's trying to control me, they're trying to now put a chip in me and all this stuff.
Yeah.
But what's interesting is that these two things have now merged on the right. They're anti-big pharma and anti-government, which I'm like,
interesting.
What's going on there?
Which is like a really good argument for anti-vaxxer to be a word of like newly relevant. Given 100% collision. Totally agree. Yeah. So just in case anyone at the American Dialect Society is listening, there you go. You're welcome.
Anyway. So, I guess that we can... There's two things to talk about, the actual episode and then our bonus episode, but they're basically the same thing.
Yes. We have Mara fucking Wilson. And she so generously allowed me to call her that when I introduced her.
Yes. In fact, she seemed to encourage it.
Yes. Which, delighted me even more. And I was super delighted that day. So,
yeah.
And speaking of that day, by the way, we have video.
We have video. So, we've never done this before, but what we're going to do is have the audio as what you're listening to right now. And it's a somewhat truncated version. Mm-hmm. Not totally truncated, but, just somewhat truncated. And then the video version, which will be on our Patreon, will be untruncated. And you can watch us goofing off and you can see, like, how the sausage is made.
Exactly. And Mara gave us her permission. So,
yes.
Yeah.
So if you want to watch this one, you can become a patron of ours at www.patreon.com/vocalfriespod. We have at the $5 a month level or the $15 a month level. $5 level gives you stickers and bonus episodes, all access to all of the ones in the past, and we're at like 40 something, 46, something like that.
Yeah.
And at the $15 a month level, if you stay for 3 months, you get a mug.
Yeah. And it's cute. It's
cute.
The only way you can get this specific mug of the Vocal Fry logo.
Yes.
So, yay!
Yeah, so we're very excited. This was a fun episode. We talk all about, all kinds of things.
Just so many things. Yeah, we hope you enjoy. It's really quite fun. Something I've been teasing on the internet for
a while now. We finally got here.
Yeah.
Like this show and want to make your own? Let me tell you about Anchor. It's free, and they have creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. And now you can even add any song from Spotify directly to your episodes. The possibilities are endless for what you can create, whether it's music analysis, your own radio show, or something the world's never heard before. Anchor will distribute your podcast for you so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many more. And you can also make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. It's everything you need to make a podcast in one place. So download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started.
Today we have Mara fucking Wilson, who is a writer, storyteller, voiceover actor, a mental health activist, and is very good at Twitter. Just really good at it. You might know her as the voice of the faceless old woman who secretly lives in your home from Welcome to Night Vale. Or perhaps you're my age and you know her as Matilda from your favorite childhood movie, Matilda. Or maybe you know her as Robin Williams' youngest child, Mrs. Doubtfire. She is the author of Where Am I Now? True Stories of Girlhood and Accidental Fame, and we are so delighted to have her with us today.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. This is something that I like to talk about a lot, so I'm glad to be here.
Oh, great! Thank you so much.
Yeah, we love it talking about it too. So
yeah.
No, I feel like there's a special connection between peoples who really are into words and language and how it impacts us all, even if we're not thinking about it.
Well, one of my brothers is a speech pathologist, and my sister, yeah. So that is something that like when his children were toddlers, you know, he would say things just like, you know, they're able to do velar trills now, and they're able to do, actually velar trills probably are a little hard, but like they're able to do alveolar trills now, and they're able to do, yeah, and he would speak in this like, you know, and you know, bilabial fricatives and you know, things like that. And it was just like, I know this stuff from studying, you know, international phonetic alphabet and accents in college.
Oh, that makes sense. Yeah. No, you just gave me chills saying those words. We never had a guest that isn't a linguist mention, or, you know, specifically a linguist.
I'm not a linguist, but my sister knows a lot about linguistics. And I've always wanted to take a linguistics course because I really like languages, and I felt like that was kind of like a cheat code to understanding them. And yeah, and voice and language I think is awesome. And I love IPA. I love the International Phonetic Alphabet so much. I'm like in a Facebook group called Yet Another Problem That Could Have Been Solved with IPA.
Oh my God, that's perfect.
That's amazing. So when you hear IPA, the first thing you think of is the alphabet and not the beer?
Yeah, I mean, I was never into the beer. I don't drink anymore, but when I was, I did not like IPAs. So probably when I had like a lot of friends who lived in Brooklyn and drank like Brooklyn IPAs, I probably did. But IPA for me is the IPA, it makes everything so much easier.
We just like both have heart eyes in our on our face.
I know.
This is oh my God.
I mean, this is not something that's ever come up in any of your interviews before.
Yeah, it really hasn't. It really hasn't. But yeah, let's talk about schwas, baby.
Oh wait, Carrie, please tell her about the sweater.
Oh my goodness. Okay, so a long time ago now, my dad is a knitter. My mom taught him how, but he's really the knitter of the family. And I am now too, but he knit me a sweater back in my early 20s that was a schwetter. So it was made out of schwas. And it also had like Hilfiger sign, except that it was Noam Chomsky instead.
Oh my gosh, that is amazing.
Yes.
Wow.
Family
That's fantastic. That's fantastic. I remember our voice and speech teacher saying, "It's all right to schwa."
It is all right to schwa.
It is all right to schwa.
It's a very useful sound.
It is.
Yeah, I gotta say, we have had, as I call him, the linguist accent or dialect coach on our show before, and I gained this huge appreciation for actors after that. I just, you know, like, I think that us people who aren't actors are kind of very critical.
They are.
Of people with bad, or like, quote unquote, bad accents in shows. Like, why? That's not how you sound Southern or whatever.
Yeah.
But then talking to him and realizing how fucking hard it is.
I sort of love when an accent slips a little bit, because I love being like, you can put in such a wonderful performance, but you're still human. That I kind of love, when there's a tiny bit of an accent slip. A lot of times you'll see it in a pilot or a season 1, and then by season 2 or season 3, they've like, we picked up on it, okay? You're not saying tissue anymore. You're saying tissue. You're not saying this anymore. You gotta work those O's. You know, you gotta do that.
Speaking of that, I read a really old Facebook post of mine where I'd rewatched Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure because it was filmed in Tempe.
Oh, was it?
Yes.
That explains a lot.
The first one was, and maybe the second, I don't know, but the third one wasn't.
Yeah.
But anyway, I noticed that Keanu slipped in a sorry.
Yeah. Stories are I remember Elliot Page in Juno saying herbs and me being like, Canadian spotted.
I think that's an Eastern Canadian thing, because I definitely do not say that.
Because I've heard that before, herbs. And I have a Canadian sister-in-law, and so there's like herbs and mum and things like that. Like little things will slip in. And it's also really funny because, my sibling who's married to them, I get a lot of, now they've started saying, oh yeah. And yeah, they've gotten some Canadianisms in there too, which is really funny. Nice. It's really funny to hear. But herbs, I've definitely heard, which I think is a Britishism. So he has the line, "What is it with you yuppies and your herbs?" And he said herbs, and I was like, I see you.
Wait. I'm really embarrassed right now, but Keanu was Canadian.
I think he grew up part of the time in Canada and part of the time elsewhere.
In Hawaii, I think, something like
Hawaii
that.
For sure.
He was kind of all over the place, yeah.
Yeah. So it's actually kind of surprising that he had sorry. Must have been him just like freshly moved from Canada.
Some people in the Midwest say sorry. I worked for a woman. I worked for a woman from Wisconsin. Yes, I worked for a woman from Wisconsin, and she said sorry.
Yes, I don't know if you're into TikTok at all, but the trans handyman on there has very Wisconsin.
Oh man,
and she says sorry.
I love Wisconsin. So I went to a visual arts, a boarding school for the visual and performing arts, and I noticed that we had two teachers there who basically headed up the theater department, and they were both from Wisconsin, and their names were Bonnie and Todd. And they would teach us, and Bonnie was one of the best teachers I've ever had. And we sometimes used to try to talk like them just to kind of tease them, and they didn't seem to notice. And Bonnie taught theater history, and you will never forget what the word tragedy means when it has been taught to you by somebody with a Wisconsin accent. Tragedy literally means ode to a goat. It does. It means goat song. It means goat song.
But I love it.
And it's because it's for Dionysus, and Dionysus is the goat and all that. That's what tragedy means, but ode to a goat. You don't forget that.
Never would forget. No. I'll never forget.
And now
it.
I won't.
Yeah.
So let's talk about voices, since that's really why we want to have you on. So what kind of messaging is there about women's voices in Hollywood, and how is it policed in the industry?
It's interesting. I think that a lot of the message that we got for a very long time is there's a very easy way to make yourself sound unintelligent, and that is vocal fry and upspeak. And essentially speaking the way that I grew up speaking, because I am a veritable Valley girl. I'm from Burbank, California, East Valley, San Fernando Valley. Here we would call it the San Fernando Valley. We use extraneous thes and these. But especially for the freeways are, it's the 5. It's not 5. Why would you say that? The 405.
It's the same in Arizona, too. It's
yeah,
the 10.
We do that, too. Yeah.
It's interesting because the reason, I don't know why you guys do it there. Maybe because there's a lot of people who moved from California to Arizona. Probably. But I also know, and I know several, but also I think it's because out here, it's because it used to be like the Hollywood freeway, the Ventura freeway. So, and then they changed it to the numbers. So now it's the 5, the 110, the 101. So that's why we do that. I think we have a reason for it. But I am a Valley girl, and that is the way that I talked. And I always had a really low voice growing up, and I still have a pretty low voice. And when I was like 11 or 12, like my voice did change significantly. And I spoke in a very low register for a very long time. Like I was an 11-year-old who sounded like Allison Janney.
Love it.
Yeah, it was pretty great. And then when I got to college, I never took any voice and speech classes in high school, even though I really needed a few. But it was because they were like, well, you already have a very resonant voice and you can't dance or move at all. So, which was to be expected because I'd spent a lot of my life on camera, and camera acting is, here up. So I never knew what to do with my hands. I never knew what to do with my feet. I was always fidgeting. So they put me in a lot of movement classes so I could become more comfortable in my body. But the movement classes were at the same time as voice and speech. So it was only when I got to college that I actually took a voice and speech class. And I remember you can hear me on there being like, I don't know, I guess they thought that my voice was normal. I guess they thought my voice was clear enough. And I saw my voice teacher like holding back something, trying not to. I think in Hollywood, but it is kind of hard. And I think that when I moved there, I consciously tried to change the way that I talked. I tried to sound more like a New Yorker. And I find myself doing this, and it's really embarrassing that I do this, but I have a people-pleasing streak. And so when I go to different places, I try to speak the way that they speak. I don't imitate their accents, but I try to, or their dialects, but I try to pick up on phrases that they use. And I try to do these things. The only place I don't do that is in England, because they are very, very touchy about that. They're very, very touchy about you picking up their accents. They know that you're American and they can smell it from a mile away, and they hate that. And they'll be like, actually, you're doing more of a Cheshire accent. And actually, and they'll just be, yeah. And that's very, I've had issues there, but even there, like after 2 weeks, I said cheers to my friend when she helped me move my suitcase. And I tried to at least do that. I want to blend in. So I very consciously tried to do that in New York, and I thought about it later, and I was like, why did I do that? And I was like, well, because I associated California with the film industry, which I was breaking away from and very frustrated with, and because people thought I was dumb. And if I told them I was an actor and I sounded like a Valley girl, they were going to think I was stupid. And I didn't want to be seen as stupid. I really didn't want to be seen as that. So I tried very, very hard to change the way that I talked. And I think that dialect, that Valley Girl dialect, is sort of shorthand for being stupid and being shallow. It's interesting because I think that we had kind of a pushback in that eventually. Like if you watch Legally Blonde or you watch Clueless, like these girls, they are not stupid. They are very hard workers. They are, they maybe haven't focused on these things all their lives. They were focusing on organizing their closets instead of, reading Proust and Nietzsche or whatever. But they weren't encouraged to do that, but they are very good at what they do. They are very capable. They are very thoughtful. And I think that it is used as sort of a shorthand. And I could go on and on and on. And I probably will at some point do something about like the Valley Girl dialect and what it means to me and how it's associated with areas that it really shouldn't be. And it's associated. And there's a lot of things that we don't take into account about class and race and the history of California when you do that. I think that actually a lot of California speak has had there's been a lot of Chicano influence on the California English dialect that we don't acknowledge. And I think that that's race and class and gender all come into play with it. And so it's a big complicated thing. And I also know that the way that I talk is also influenced by my own, I guess, neurodivergence or whatever, my own ADHD, my own OCD, because I'm often distracted by my own thoughts. And I've noticed that my family does this. My family does this too. A lot of people in my family do it. And I think I'm probably the only one with like diagnosed ADHD and stuff. But I noticed that what we'll do is we'll be talking to you really straight and we'll be really focused about something, and then something will kind of catch our eye. And for those of you just listening, I'm looking off to the side and I'm looking all around, and I might say things that I might just kind of keep talking. And then I snap back to it. And I do that a lot, so much so that one of my friends who's also like non-neurotypical asked me, they were like, do you have a speech impediment? And I was like, I don't think that I do, but I might actually. I don't know if that technically counts as that. When I was in college, they would say there was a big sign with the word like on it, and there was a circle and a line through it. They said, say what you mean. And the thing is, I understand when I'm giving a speech, when I'm doing a show, I don't want to use the word like. I know that I use the words I mean and to do these things, to say. I use well a lot too, a lot of filler words. But I think that a lot of that, for me, and I think this is something very feminine. And I think that if you're a feminine person, you do these things a lot. You use those things to soften or to connect with another person. So when I say, I'm checking in with you. I'm saying, and if they nod, they nod. If they don't, I'll try to explain it more. And so I think that I did that maybe consciously at one point, but now it's become kind of an unconscious thing. And if I say, well, that's softening it a little bit. If I say, like, I can't say it's the worst thing that's ever happened to me. That's pretty dramatic. If I say it's like the worst thing that's ever happened to me, that's hyperbole. If I say, or if you say it's terrible, but that's like terrible is means like that's surprisingly terrible. or that's kind of terrible, or that's actually pretty. It's a different kind of thing. I do think that it softens things, and I do think that it changes things, and I do think it is underappreciated in everyday speech. I mean, this said, I completely understand if somebody's giving a speech, if somebody's in an interview, you do want them to be as clear as possible. But for me, I think that so much of this is about socializing. So much of the way that girls speak is about socializing. And I think that it's kind of, I think that a lot of Hollywood doesn't like, and a lot of people, I think, don't like femininity.
Yeah, I agree.
Oh, yeah.
They associate it with weakness, and they associate it with stupidity.
Yeah, when I was younger, I tried to be, like, less feminine on purpose.
Same. Now I'm just like, you know what? I like tea parties. I like dressing up. I like cats. I like babies. I like pink. Yeah. I like everything that's feminine. I like lipstick. I like all kinds of feminine stuff. Don't really like jewelry, but that's because I'm allergic to nickel. And I don't necessarily like things that are, I'm not, I think they also associate femininity with materialism. And I wouldn't say I'm a very materialistic person. I'm not, wild about shopping or things like that. But I like being one of the girls. That's definitely, a lot of my friends are female or feminine. And I don't feel like these are bad things. I think that these are neutral things. Yeah. And I think that, just as I think a lot of masculine things are negative too, there's negative things that with like proving masculinity and taking to it extremes, of course, but I feel like these are neutral things and they're shown to be negative.
Oh yeah. Like I have to use Microsoft Outlook for email for work. And they have this new thing where basically everything I type, it puts blue dots underneath it, and then you click it, and it says, needs more concise or here's more concise language. And it removes my just. It always removes the just. It, always removes some of my adverbs, and I'm like, ugh.
It's weird, because in an email, like, I feel like softening is actually really important, because otherwise
I think so brusque. Too. You need to be very careful with your exclamation points, with your please, with your if it's not too big a deal, if it's not... Yeah, you have to soften an email. And that's the thing, too, is that there's also a dialect that we use on the internet, which is based on spoken speech. It's not based on written speech. And so that is very, that is a whole other thing. And I do think if you were speaking out loud, a lot of emails are basically what they would be if you were speaking out loud. Yeah. You would say, just shoot it over to me when you can, or just do this, or can we please just maybe like try this? That's the way that it would be.
Yeah. And then it makes me wonder, okay, so you're telling me to be more concise or whatever, or the workplace, I'm supposed to get rid of my jests and likes. What's wrong with everyone who's considered, masculine or whatever to be more like me? Like, what is the problem with, softening things? Maybe that's a way, like, a better way to connect with people.
That's interesting to me, too, because there's so many different ways of softening things. There's the British, with all due respect, sir, which means, I think that you're out of your mind. I have a lot of my Californian friends, and this happened to me in Australia too, because Australia and Southern California, at least the parts of Australia that I've been to, and Southern California seems to have very similar cultures. People don't like that when I don't hear them, I say, "What did you say?" They say that's too direct. But I said, if I say pardon, if I say I'm sorry, they don't know why I'm saying I'm sorry. If I say what, that, they might not know if I didn't hear them or if I'm reacting to what they said. I used to just go, but my dad is like hearing impaired in one ear, and he couldn't hear me say that. So now I just say, what did he say? And I think that I'm being, but people say that I say it too fiercely, and it scares them a little bit. Like, what did you say? I'm interrogating them, and I'm like, oh, no, I'm sorry. I'm just trying to be, and so now I'm trying to be, and it's funny because I also used to say, excuse me, but then I was in a wedding I was in my friend's wedding, and the groom and all of the groomsmen were English, and excuse me, I guess means that you just farted. And so I didn't want them thinking that I had just passed gas all the time. So I was like, okay, yeah. Maybe I should change that.
Speaking of Valley Girl and LA, have you seen the Bling Ring?
I haven't. I know of it, but I haven't seen it. That is not the LA that I grew up in. The LA that I grew up in is very different. The LA that I grew up in was I don't know. It was very different. I can get into it later, but what were you going to say about it?
The
She's obsessed with one of the actresses in it. That's what it is.
with love, Emma Watson's attempt to do California English seems to me very over-exaggerated and almost like veering towards like baby talk, as if that's like what California English is. Like some people, for some reason, have the idea that the baby talk thing is Californian, or I don't know if it's because of the whole intelligence thing and thinking that it doesn't make you sound smart.
That's really interesting. I've seen clips of her in it, and yeah, and I don't want to criticize her performance either, but I did while I was watching it, I did feel, I was like, something feels a little off, and I can't quite put my finger on it. When they were all talking, but it's really hard. It's a very specific. It's one of these kinds of things there where it seems a lot easier than it actually is. I would say a lot of Southern dialects seem a lot more easy than they are. Like I met somebody. It was funny because I met somebody in. I guess I spent a lot of time in the UK in the past few years, but I like met with a friend and she was wearing cowboy boots and I was like, oh, nice boots. And she's like, thanks. I was just listening to Hadestown and I like felt kind of like I should, I wanted to be kind of Southern. But the thing about Hadestown is it's a musical where, well, first of all, it's set, in a place where you literally have Hades. So it's not exactly there, but there is a Southern influence in it, but it's an Eastern Southern influence. It's a Louisiana influence. It's, that's what it is. So all the music in it is jazz. So it's Southeast. And people in the Southeast don't wear cowboy boots. They wear maybe sharkskin or snakeskin shoes, maybe. And so I remember thinking to her, I was just like, this is like getting, and it's so completely different. Like if you wear cowboy boots, you're in Texas or actually Arizona where I got my cowboy boots. Yeah. I love my cowboy boots. I wear them all the time. They're my most comfortable shoes. But I remember thinking that and just thinking like, oh yeah. I mean, they get annoyed with us when we don't know the difference here, but they don't know the difference between, like there's a difference in dialects between Oklahoma and Michigan, and they're not going to know that. Right, yeah. And so I think that it's very easy to do sort of broadly. Like I know, who is it? There's an actor I like who, like Alexander Skarsgård, anytime he does an American accent, he slips into Southern. And I was reading, I saw a movie that he was in based on a book that I'd read. And the character in it had kind of a Southern twang. But I know that from reading the book, the character was actually, like, it was based on a real person, and that real person was from, I think, Long Island. Oh, so they would have had a totally different, different, yeah. They would have sounded more like this, They probably would have they probably would have sounded a little bit more like this. They would have had a little bit, maybe a little bit more nasal. They wouldn't have sounded the way that he was speaking.
It's hard to imagine him with a Long Island accent, actually, now that you mention it.
And actually, it's funny because in Australia, I've never gotten this anywhere else, but in Australia, they were like, your accent's kind of sexy. And I was like, really? I don't think our accents are sexy at all. And like the woman that was taking us around, she was like, oh yeah. She's like, maybe it's just because of past experiences, but I think some are very sexy. She goes, I think Long Island accents are sexy. And I was like, Long Island? You think that is sexy? Long Island?
It's not really coded as sexy over here.
It's not. Sure. It's not. Although I did realize the other day, like I watched something where there was like a woman from New Jersey, and I was like, oh no, I have a thing for New Jersey people. I've dated a lot, and like I've dated a lot of people from New Jersey. I don't know why, and like my first serious relationship was with someone from New Jersey. And also, I mean, I grew up with Danny DeVito as like a, basically like a surrogate uncle. So I have a soft spot for New Jersey.
Yeah. Aw, Danny DeVito.
I know.
He's lovely.
What a sweetheart. I found an article, actually it's pretty recent, about you from March this year. And it's the list and why you never see Mara Wilson in movies anymore. But this stuck out to me. It says, Wilson's charming smirk and sweet voice always had the audience on her side. Do you feel that way about your voice at that age? And if so, when do you feel like you switched to, like, people not thinking it's sweet voice anymore?
I actually think that people didn't like my voice when I was young because I had a lisp. And I actually was called out for that a lot. They said that it was really annoying. And I even had people say, did you put that on? Did you put that lisp on? No, I was 5. Of course I didn't. And I was sort of working through it. And I had people saying, she lisped her way through this movie and she's doing the same thing here. And it was, yeah. And I actually later on, I called out the writer who did this, and she apologized to me. And then I ran into her at an event and she apologized to me face to face. So we're cool now. And she's like, I was totally in the wrong. I shouldn't have done that. You're absolutely right.
Right. And it's ableist.
It is. It really is. And and about a child too. And so I kind of grew out of my lisp. I think, sort of naturally. I remember going to speech therapy classes at school, and they were just like, oh, no, you don't really have it anymore. Just, they carried on a conversation with me, and they listened to me closely, and then they sent me back to class. So it wasn't that big of a deal. So people didn't like that. I did read a book by some casting directors that I worked with a lot who told me that they always really liked my voice because they liked that it was a little husky for a kid's. And I also found out later on that the woman who plays Bart Simpson, Nancy Cartwright, actually used my voice for a character on The Simpsons as inspiration because, like, I had a lot of loose teeth, and sometimes that would make me have kind of a lisp or something. And so she used my voice to create the voice of a character on The Simpsons. And I think I know which character it is. It's not a big character. So there's an episode where Mo, who runs the bar, starts up this, like, TGI Fridays kind of restaurant. And there's a little girl there who says, the soda is too cold. It makes my teeth hurt. And I think that's probably what she used it for. But I think that's like the highest praise that I can imagine. I think that's one of the coolest things that's ever happened to me.
Yeah.
I don't know, but I definitely feel like my voice definitely changed as I got older, and I didn't have as much of a range anymore. I also used to sing when I was a kid, and I was a pretty good singer. I never really sang in public. I always wanted to. I took voice lessons, and for a kid, I wasn't bad. But then, yeah, as I got older, I kind of had to learn to sing again. And for a while, I was just like, no, I'm a contralto. I only have this range. I only have that. And I think a lot of that was also soprano seemed too prissy for me. So I was just kind of like, I definitely, as Carrie was saying, I definitely had the sort of rejection of anything feminine. And I feel like I also had that sort of rejection of me from like a lot of people who told me they love Matilda. 2 years later, in middle school, they would tell me that they thought it sucked. And I think that that's just sort of a thing that happens, especially when you're, when you're a girl, when you're AFAB growing up. It's sort of like how kids throw away their Barbie dolls and like destroy their Barbie dolls. And I think that I was kind of seen as that. I was seen as something childish, especially since I was only in kids' movies. So I was kind of like at my school, and I grew up in Burbank, California, where we have NBC Studios and Warner Brothers lot in our backyards. I was seen as doing something that wasn't as cool, while the kids who were in Gap commercials were seen as the cool ones. Yeah, so I got bullied for being in kids' movies, which was very strange. And there was, I think, sort of a rejection of that. And I don't think that my rejection from Hollywood had a lot to do with my voice. I think actually, I consider my voice one of my best features. I love my voice. I've always really liked my voice. I do think that my speech patterns can be a little all over the place, but I've always really liked my voice, and I've done a lot to make sure that I can keep it. And I can do a lot with it in voiceover. I think it was more, I was at an awkward age. And I didn't go through that as easily. I mean, speaking of Emma Watson, I didn't look like her. She's a literal Chanel model, and I wasn't going to grow up to be a model. I just wasn't. And it was better for me to sort of bow out and go back into doing theater and go back into doing things that I really wanted to do, like writing and studying those things. It was better for me to be doing those things. So I think actually my voice carried me through. In fact, I still was doing voiceover pretty much. Like, I never stopped being a voiceover actress. I never stopped. I was still doing it a little bit in school projects and things like that. People would be like, Mara, can you narrate this? I still was doing a lot of stuff with my voice, my whole childhood, my whole adolescence, and into adulthood. So I got back into voiceover when I was like right out of college, a couple years out of college. And basically what happened is I was meeting my book agent, and she said, we have a voiceover department here. And I walked across and I introduced myself and I talked a little bit, and he said, and I said, I'm very good at doing voiceover. And I don't give myself credit for a lot, so I don't want to sound egotistical here, but I do think, and I don't actually think that I'm like a genius at recording. Like, I'm not like, Tara Strong or like people like that who are really But I do like doing like audiobooks, and I do like doing those kinds of things. So like I don't have a lot of character voices that I can do. I'm not Nancy Cartwright, you know?
Who is?
Exactly. So all these like big name voiceover actors, Mark Hamill, they are extremely talented, and I don't have that kind of voice, I don't think. But I went there and he was like, yeah, you have a good announcer voice. We could do something with this. And I started going out on auditions, and yeah, so you have probably heard my voice in a commercial or a radio commercial at some point, possibly. And that was really fun. I had a lot of fun doing that. So I never really did, it never was my voice, I don't think, but I did definitely get people, when they would hear interviews with me or podcasts with me. A couple years ago, I was trying to link to a podcast I'd done, and I couldn't find the direct link, so I just looked it up on Twitter. And somebody on there had said, I really wish I could listen to this podcast, but Mara's likes and knows are making it really annoying.
Oh, being a woman in podcasting.
Exactly. Every woman I know has had this problem. Every woman I know has had people say, your voice is too shrill, it's too this, you say, I know too much, you say, you know too much, you say, like too much. And I also looked at this person was from New York, and I was like, look, I lived in New York. I know the New York dialect. I know what you probably sound like. I know you have annoying vocal tics as well, because I lived in New York and I consciously tried to change my voice to sound like New York, and I know all of the vocal patterns there. So I was like, come on now. You know that you have just as many annoying vocal things as I do.
Right. I mean, people should know that.
Yeah, but they don't. They don't. It's really, but I do think it's people not liking femininity. People don't like weakness, I think. They associate femininity with weakness, and they associate not being direct with weakness, I think. And people don't like weakness because they don't like weakness in themselves. Like, it always comes back to that, I think. People are afraid of being seen as weak. And so when they see other people who are weak, they're like, no, you suck. Stop doing that. Stop being like that, because it reminds me that I am weak. That might be a bit reductive, but that's how I see it.
No, I think you're onto something. But the problem also is, if you are more direct, like, I think I'm a pretty direct person, I also get in trouble for that.
Same.
You just can't win.
Yeah, I get in trouble for what did you say, but I also get in trouble for it, like, and So it's kind of like my friend Abe Goldfarb, he's wonderful, and he does a lot of voiceover acting. And I remember we were talking about my voice once, and he said, you have an interesting hybrid of a Valley girl and New York accent now. And I was like, I do, don't I? I mean, my stepmother said that when I came back from NYU, I was talking twice as fast, and I was much more direct. So yeah, but you really do feel like you can't win.
The comment about having this hybrid, do you think that person at the audiobook place would have said, you have a perfect voice for this, if you were just straight up Californian English?
No, I know that. And one of my brothers, I mean, I have a lot of brothers. Another one of my brothers is a college professor, and he told me that he consciously changed the way that he talked because he didn't want to be thought of as stupid. He wanted to be respected. So he speaks a much more sort of baseline American now too. And he's very smart and very academically smart. And he went to Johns Hopkins and Harvard and kind of adopted more of an East Coast sort of hybrid to make him sound more. And now he sounds more neutral, but he said that he's like, yeah, I have to consciously watch it because people will think of me as dumb.
I guess there are like men who sound like Californian who do get pegged as dumb, but I think of it more as the woman's problem.
Yeah, it is definitely, it can kind of happen across genders. And I've seen that too. And I've also known like trans women who changed the way that they spoke. And they started speaking more, with more upspeak and more of this and talking softer and changing that. And that I think is a really interesting phenomenon. I also know I've known some Black women who say, oh yeah, I adopt a Valley Girl accent when I don't want to be seen as the angry Black woman. So it can work in some ways too. So I think that it is something that, I don't know. I think it's a very interesting phenomenon.
Yeah, I just learned, I believe it was Nicole Holiday who came up with this term, sociolinguistic labor, when we're changing the way that we speak to accommodate ourselves to whatever situation, to sound smarter or to sound less angry or whatever. Yeah, we don't think about that enough as something, as a cognitive load, as really like taking up resources in ourselves.
I kind of, what I always said is like, I worked with a nonprofit that repainted New York City public schools for a long time. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times the kids that we had painting the schools were perfect. The adult volunteers were not as good as following directions. And I always said that I would put on my Joan Holloway from Mad Men voice. I would go on and I would, so much of my job was just going up to volunteers and being like, okay, that's really not what we need to be doing right now. And doing that and adopting that voice was, okay, how about we do something different right now? That kind of soft-spoken, breathy, doing that, and they would, and that would kind of make it, that would make it gentle. Like there really is a shift and a change, and I don't think people took me, but I also feel like people took me more seriously because I had a naturally low voice, which is interesting. I think that was another thing too, is that people are always telling me, I'm 5 feet tall, and people are always telling me that I don't seem that short, and I think it's because of my voice, because my voice is low and it is loud.
Megan listened to two of you in another podcast, and she noticed that you used the word yenta, and so she wanted to know what your relationship was with Yiddish.
Yeah, I grew up with a lot of Yiddish words that I didn't really know were Yiddish, and because I grew up in Southern California, a lot of Spanish words kind of made their way into my dialect as well. And you know, Latino, Latinx Spanish and Mexican Spanish, I would say a lot of my friends were from, you know, were Mexican American, or, you know, their families emigrated from El Salvador, Guatemala, places like that. And I remember being young and my mom saying on the phone, okay, see you mañana. And I was like, oh, Mom, come on. And she's like, what? And I was like, not everybody speaks Yiddish, Mom. Yeah, I thought mañana was a Yiddish word because when my mom wasn't speaking English, I associated, I thought that that's what it was. And it was really, so there were a lot of Yiddishisms in my growing up. And it wasn't full sentences, but it was just words. So, you know, if you were in trouble, you might get a potch. Or you would be threatened with a potch, rather, which was a spanking. There was a lot of things like, I'm trying to remember, you know, we all said oy vey. We all said, you know, all these little things, oigewalt, geschlacht dein Kopf, und schrei, which is, or something, there's something a phrase that says go bang your head against the wall and scream bloody murder. Yeah, a lot of these are like little kid words I think about, like, you know, like, do you want a potch? No, I don't want a potch, you know, which, like, you wouldn't say to your kids today, but this was 30 years ago. And like pish, which meant to pee, like, you know, before bed and things like that. And, we learned like just little phrases and of course, you know, oy vey went in there and, you know, we all knew yenta and we all knew all of these like little words that were thrown in there. And it was just very common. It was just kind of thrown in there and mazel tov. I still say mazel tov to everybody. Lived in New York and LA. I assume that everybody knows what mazel tov means.
I think at this point, most people do.
Yeah, exactly. And so there's a lot of things that, it was very common in my house. And I did not actually speak Yiddish and I knew nothing about Yiddish structure, but, and I don't think we ever spoke Yiddish in full sentences, but we said the words around us so much that I didn't know. There were some words I didn't know if they were English or if they were Yiddish or they were something else. And my mom spoke some Spanish and was fluent in French. So I think so sometimes I thought, you know, like saying like, I thought was Yiddish for a long time. I thought ay was Yiddish. I thought, and I thought mañana was Yiddish. And I think that as I got older, I got a little bit more self-conscious about it. I mean, I remember saying Mazel Tov jokingly when a girl announced that it was her birthday on the subway, and the person I was dating at the time overheard somebody make a remark about Jews and pulled me off at the next stop after that. You know, so heard somebody saying an anti-Semitic slur, and he pulled me off the subway and was like, "We're going to change trains now."
Yeah, that was the right move.
Yeah, and it was strange because I don't think I ever expected that to happen in New York. But it did. And so I think that I became more self-conscious about it because I knew that we were like one of the only Jewish families in town. And I did become more self-conscious about it as I got older. But I mean, I love that. And we still do, my family and I, we still say things to each other in Yiddish, all the time. And sometimes in Hebrew, although my Hebrew is way more limited.
Last year, one of the Words of the Year nominations was "Ausgezumt," which is from Yiddish. Fatigue or bored by Zoom. That's one of my favorites.
Yeah.
I love that. Yeah.
That's perfect.
Well, we're running out of time with you. So basically, how can we be better about our expectations of women in the world, of women in front of the camera, of just people in general?
I think try to understand where people are coming from. Try to understand what their background is, why they say this. Instead of just saying, don't say like right. anymore. Think of why they may be saying it, and think of also why they might have been trained to say it. And because like I said, for me, it was a way to soften things. And it was also because I couldn't immediately think of something because my mind was distracted. So I think try to just ask yourself why. I think it's never a bad idea to ask yourself why and how. Or why do I think that they're like this? And I think that that's good. And I think that it's way too easy to generalize. And I mean, I know I've done it, probably even in this very conversation, but it's way too easy to just be like, oh, that's annoying. That's this, that's that. I hate that. Also ask yourself why you hate it. Right. What is it about it that you find annoying? Because that's the thing. I really don't like when people are like, oh, that's really annoying. And I'm like, well, why is it annoying? Well, it's just annoying. Okay, but why does it annoy you? Well, it just does. That's not a good excuse. And sometimes when something annoys me and I can't figure it out, like it will keep me awake at night. Like, why does this actress annoy me? And you should have a reason for finding something annoying. And a lot of times it's because it reminds you of your own past, or it reminds you of yourself and something you don't like in yourself, or it reminds you of somebody you know and something that you don't like in them. I have found. So ask yourself why they do this. Ask yourself how they do it, and ask yourself why it bothers you before you make these judgments about them.
Yeah, stop and think.
Yeah.
Yep, that's our thing. Stop and think. Yeah,
exactly.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you so much. This is really fun conversation.
Thank you. Yeah, this has been really fun.
Yeah. Oh, thank you.
Thank you so much.
We always leave our listeners with one final message. Don't be an asshole.
Don't be an asshole.
The Vocal Fries podcast is produced by me, Carrie Gillen, for Halftone Audio. Theme music by Nick Granum. You can find us on Tumblr, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at VocalFriesPod. You can email us at vocalfriespod@gmail.com, and our website is vocalfriespod.com.